the Valley Current.
Hey, look at you. You look like a young man.
You are. I just can't tell you how you just exploded in my esteem for you when you let me know that you bought a frickin' RV.
You know, I just couldn't pass on this American dream. The American dream of visiting every federal park before it closes due to Trump cuts. Every national park. I think the national park system is going to go out of business soon.
Well, look, you just so I take the Amtrak. There's an Amtrak that goes from Dallas to Texarkana, where I go to visit my kids.
Right.
And the coolest thing is that to get on that Amtrak, you got to go to the bus station, and bus stations in America are absolutely like Greyhound bus stations,
right?
Because 50% of the people there just got out of prison,
right?
And they got a voucher. I mean, it's just a wonderful place to hang out at. So
it's like going to the New York subway, right? You see all of America right there in the New York subway.
Well, you see a lot of them. I don't disagree with you there. So you don't know this about me, but I haven't had access to a printer for 5 years.
You don't need it.
And so this is the first time we've done this, that I actually have some supporting data so I can have a conversation without making stuff up.
You don't make stuff up.
So
you're totally into it, man. You're the real thing. You're totally the real thing.
Look, here's the deal. I have so little credibility that I spend an enormous amount of time making sure I have my data and my sources documented. Plus, the problem is that everybody's benchmark about anything is always the stock price.
Right.
And so there is this phenomenon in America where we have been taught
mesmerized
to react to stock prices like little mice.
Right.
Okay, so the little mice, so suddenly the market's up, things are good, the market's down, things are bad, the stock's up, it must be reflecting good things. If the stock's down, so I got a friend of mine said today, he's been pushing back theoretically. He has been pushing back on the idea that the price of a new Tesla, goes to zero. And
how can he possibly push back on that?
He cannot get his head around the fact that everything he owns in the modern era, the prices, because I ask him a simple question. So what's your monthly bill to Google? And he said, well, I don't know. I said, dude, you don't pay Google. Okay. What are you paying for? Dude, you don't pay for Facebook. What do you pay for WhatsApp? You don't pay for WhatsApp.
Right.
So if I buy 250 robotaxi miles a month, and I can either send the robotaxi provider $100 a month for 250 miles, or I can ride for free, but I have to listen to advertisements.
Right.
I mean, so what am I paying for a new Tesla? Nothing if I just listen to advertisements.
Right.
What am I listening? What am I paying to listen to "Oops, I Did It Again" by Britney Spears? It cost me $2.18 when it came out. $2.18 to listen to that one song.
Right.
And now for $10 a month, I have access to 100 million songs, of which "Oops, I Did It Again" is one of them.
Right.
So it's not like we don't have a lived experience with this phenomenon. And I don't understand why everybody struggles with it. But I pointed out to him just this morning, I said, hey, look, if you don't believe that Tesla's stock is instantiating this transition, and you think somehow because the stock is down from its all-time high of only 4 months ago, okay? If you think it's somehow instantiating the fact that that all of the operating metrics of Tesla are about to collapse. If they were going lower, that's a different story, but they're not. They are collapsing, okay? So if I know that and I'm able to convey that message, then why? And if you imagine that that's somehow disastrous, explain to me why Tesla right now is worth more than every auto OEM on planet Earth.
Right. With the front page news of the Wall Street Journal this morning saying that the Tesla board opened search for CEO replacement, and the stock is still going up. I don't know if there's a reaction, not a reaction, or what.
Look, the guy hasn't worked at Tesla he doesn't work at any of his companies. I mean, what are you talking?
That's right.
He hasn't been there in years.
He's a shareholder, man. He's a major shareholder.
All right, so look.
He doesn't have to work.
I did some work for you today. Okay, so let me tell you what I'm on about.
You're organized. You're organized. I appreciate that.
Well, you know what? I'm a little bit organized, but here's the point. Here's the point. And I got here a little late because Patricia's lamp system, but here's the point. So we've had you and I have, and I sent you that list of Pat the dumbass, right?
Yeah.
That effectively detailed and itemized all of the platform changes that you and I have endured since we got in the business. And they just go on and on and on. And so to imagine that somehow, God, I don't know. I know I printed it off, but to imagine that somehow here it is. So here's the list. I'll hold it up for you. Here's the list. So 1984, commercial cell phone. 1986, enterprise software. I missed it. No PC. I missed that. No, I missed the internet. I missed e-commerce until 2015. I missed streaming music. I missed social media. I missed cloud. I missed software as a service. I missed video streaming. I missed the smartphone. No, I mean, it just goes on and on. And so the only point I'm trying to make, and I always try to make this, is I only own platforms. I don't own anything else other than general purpose platforms, which by default must be open source. They cannot possibly be closed source. As hard as all of the guys try to say it's going to be closed source, it can't happen. And so the very first, and I'll send this to you tomorrow, but my North Star is this memorandum written by Vannevar Bush and J.B. Conant on September the 30th, 1944.
That was the beginning of AI. That was the beginning of AI.
No. 1944, September the 30th, 1944, which was a memo anticipating the atomic bomb and the expansion of the atomic bomb until 1961, and at which point, 1963, the Atomic Test Ban Treaty was signed, and that was the one that mattered. There was no other general purpose platform that mattered other than that one, and I would argue that AI is bigger.
Yeah.
I would argue that AI is bigger. It arrived on November the 30th, 2022, and it's orders of magnitude bigger and orders of magnitude more dangerous. And so therefore, I don't have any interest in money. Why would I care about money? It's boring, okay? What interests me is an RV, okay? I mean, RVs.
We have talked about driving it to Philadelphia.
Well, you know,
we have talked about that.
That's what.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine pulling up to your house in Philadelphia with it? It'd be pretty funny.
Well, that's been done in Christmas Vacation when cousin what's his name showed up with his dog Snot. Right. I don't know if you remember that movie, but yeah. Okay. Anyway, yeah, that's listen. We all have dreams, okay, and that ain't one of mine.
Well, Pat, let me tell you, you're right about the advertising, because I got into a Tesla in New York, and the guy had 2 iPads on the back seat rests, and both me and Lee were watching different ads. And I said, "What is this?" And he said, "Oh, there's a company. It's owned by, I want to say it's owned by T-Mobile, that pays me to run this stuff in the back, separate from what I make from Lyft or Uber or whoever he was driving for that day." I think it was Lyft. I think it was Uber. And he said, "It's completely like, you don't even need to react. You don't even need to press the buttons, just from you watching." I said, "How much do you make?" He said, "Well, on a good month, it might be a few $100s, because you have to have the thing on, you have to run it." I said, "You should run your car 24 hours a day." He said, "I should, but I can't really trust a second driver." By the way, it was a Tesla. He had a Tesla Y.
You know why he had a Tesla? Do you know why he had a Tesla?
Yeah.
Do you know why he had a Tesla?
Yes, I do.
Why?
Because he said, I'm sick of paying for gas. I'm sick of getting oil change.
Why is he sick of paying for gas?
He just doesn't want to do it.
Why does he not want to do it? You have to get to the first principles. Because he's not stupid. Mm-hmm. Your Tesla, you don't know this number because you're a rich guy. But your Tesla, it costs you 3.2 cents to drive a mile.
Right.
His old car cost him 12 and 13 cents to drive a mile.
More. Probably more.
Anytime you see an Uber driver in a non-Tesla, he's either stupid or can't get the credit to buy an Uber or lease an Uber. Only stupid Uber drivers drive non-EVs.
Well, because they have a pre-existing car, I think, that they put into the pool, right? Mostly, right?
Probably. So I spent a lot of time on Uber a few years ago. But anyway, the point is that you can imagine that somebody is not going to go out and buy a new car when he signs up for Uber. And so they're just going to beat their brains out until they have to get a new car. And then they'll make the pivot to an electric. It doesn't matter if it's Tesla. I mean, I keep saying they're all shitty EVs. It's not possible for one EV to go better than another one. It can't happen.
We were in Dubai, and all the Uber drivers in Dubai have BYD, high-end BYD, Beyond Your Dream, the Chinese company.
Right.
They make a luxury version of the Model S. It's a total knockoff, but the seats are like the most expensive seats you could ever sit in. At least the back seats are. And they go down. They almost lie flat. You press a button. You could sleep in that car. And the guy's like, "This car is perfect." He says, "Better than a Tesla, and it's less money. It costs less money."
Of course it does. Of course it does.
Absolutely it does. There's no question about it. The same thing
in Brazil. Patricia says they're just BYDs everywhere. They're just everywhere. So, by the way, did you see those? That ramp? I suppose that's why you want to do this call. That ramp on Xiaomi. Okay,
yes.
So I've been following Huawei and Xiaomi and Foxconn, because Foxconn, who's the OEM for Apple,
right?
Foxconn is now about to be the OEM for Sony and all the other EV wannabes.
Right.
And so when I looked at that cumulative adoption curve, now here's what's important about this. Okay. So what's important is they built and delivered their first car exactly 12 months ago, April of 2024.
Right.
And so they now just delivered the cumulative 250,000 cars.
Right.
So they go from 0 to 250,000 cars, actually almost 260,000 cars in 1 year. And why that matters is because it took Tesla 8 years
Right.
to get to that level.
Right.
And so I know that Xiaomi has doubled its manufacturing footprint. So they're already at a manufacturing run rate of 1 million units right now. And probably in 8 or 9 months, they'll be at a manufacturing run rate capacity of maybe 1.5 million to 2 million units.
Right.
And so that is before Huawei comes to scale. And then you do a little work and you say, okay, so where is Xiaomi's biggest footprint? Where do they sell most of their equipment? Well, it's India. And so once you get to the saturation point in China, then Huawei and BYD, they all go to India, then they all go to Australia, they all go to Indonesia.
Maybe Russia. Maybe Russia too.
What we learned, and this is what I've been talking about for a year, and so I suspected this was happening last year. I just said, this is, when I started watching how fast the average selling prices at Tesla were dropping, when I started watching the auto gross margins go from 30% to 20 to 18%, and then I noticed the BYD numbers exploding higher, and that's when it hit me. And then the Xiaomi numbers today, then I said, "Oh my gosh, my early numbers were 100% penetration, 100% global EV sales by 2030. So 100% of every new car sold globally won't have a gas tank by 2030, which sounds like a preposterous idea. It sounds absolutely absurd, okay? Right. Except when you consider that in 2024, 22% of every new car sold globally, that includes every other country on the planet, including the US, 22% of every car sold globally in 2024 didn't have a gas tank. Which means if you own an oil and gas company in your portfolio, there's a possibility you're a dumbass. I mean, I'm just saying, I'm not calling anybody a dumbass, okay? I'm just saying, if 60% of every barrel of oil goes to cars globally, and 22% of every new car sold globally didn't have a gas tank in 2024, and so my previous model had 100% of every new car sold globally by 2029, 2030. I think that number is now good to go. I think that's going to happen. And that's why it's such a big deal. By the way, I keep telling everybody that GM and Ford go out of business. Right. And I sent that video around the other day about GM and Ford talking about their, we're building these plants and we're doing this and we're doing that, and
maybe they accept out trucks and these companies just build trucks.
Dude, no. They go out of business. All right. So here's the number. Here's the number, and this is the number that is outside the Overton window. Okay, this is what I keep talking about. So when I say, GM and Ford are going away, they're not going to exist. And if you're an American, if I say to you, Mr. American, you're not going to be able to buy a car with a gas tank probably by 2030, I look like a crazy guy. What are you talking about? What are you talking? Of course I will. I'm an American, okay? Well, in the United States, GM sold 2.7 million cars in America in 2024. You want to take a guess how many of those were electric? You can't, okay? Because your brain can't do that math. It's 114,000.
Okay.
They're not in the EV business.
Right.
And they're not going to be in the EV business.
Well, how can they not be in the EV business based on everything you're saying? They have the data, right? They have
They've
the
had the
data.
data since 2010.
Right, but they're stuck. They're stuck in the.
They're not stuck.
Thinking, right?
They're a shitty American company like Boeing. Okay? They exist to take care of the vested interest. That's it. They're going to hoover up these massive prices for the next 4 and 5 and 6 years, and then they'll sort of drift off and sell off this division and sell off that. But think about Ford. Ford sold 2,078,832 cars in 2024. Okay, that was their total sales for Ford. Of that 2,097,000 were electric vehicles. So if you're a Ford heir, if you're one of the 100 grandkids of Henry Ford, okay, right, and you own 45% of the company, all right?
Right. Would
you rather Ford liquidate the company and give you all the money? Or have the Ford board of directors say, we got this $10 trillion worth of manufacturing capacity that's going to be building cars or product that will be functionally illegal to sell in America in 2035 and 2034. And, we got all these Chinese people coming over here. So we got two choices. We can cut your dividend, all you Ford heirs, okay? And spend all this free cash flow on liquidating our ICE facilities, our ICE footprint, and transition to EVs. We can do that, or we can shut this baby down over the next 5 years and send you all your money. But you got to promise not to tell anyone that that's what we're doing. And all you have to do is do a Google search for GM stock buyback. Okay. If they were intending on competing in the EV business, they wouldn't be buying stock back, and they wouldn't be raising their dividend. If Ford had an intention of being in the electric vehicle business, they wouldn't have a stock buyback, and they wouldn't be raising the dividend. So it's not like this is hard logic flow for me.
But don't trucks get an exception for gas? Don't trucks get allowed to use gas?
Light vehicle trucks don't. When you're having a conversation about heavy duty long haul trucks, then that's a different conversation. But that's also another reason why I don't even care about the retail side of the EV sector. I care about the commercial side. I care about J.B. Hunt's 23,000 trucks, 23,000 tractors. So J.B. Hunt's got the largest trucking company in America, 23,000 tractors. They are in the process right now of shifting to electric.
Really?
Tesla's already built out their new semi-truck factory next to the Gigafactory in Nevada right now. So at a 50,000 a year run rate for tractors, that means they can fulfill all of J.B. Hunt's needs, and they can fulfill all of probably Schneider or maybe Yellow Freight. But what does that actually mean? What does that actually mean? What it means is these electric semis are going to overwhelm certain routes. They are perfect. Full self-driving in these semis is perfect for going from Port of San Diego to Chicago, because it's just a straight ride with one or two little turns. And and that's where all the money is. That's where all of the freight money goes to. And so I don't know how that sector of the market's going to play out. I mean, I don't know, but a part of me believes that a lot of these trucking companies are going to be capital light, and they'll simply just lease these trucks from Tesla.
Be logistics, just information systems.
Yeah, they'll lease the truck from Tesla. Right. And so can you imagine a semi-truck going into downtown Manhattan right now to make some deliveries? The answer is no. When is that going to happen? Who cares is the right answer. What's going to happen is these trucks will leave Port of San Diego. They'll stop at 500 miles. They'll recharge for 30 or 40 minutes. They'll get to a drayage yard in New Jersey, and then a human driver will do the last 5 miles.
Right.
So that's what it's going to look like. That's what it's going to look like.
Well, the reason I raised the issue about trucks is because Ford announced that they were getting out of the car business, except for the Mustang. They weren't going to provide cars anymore. No more Ford Focus, no more Ford this, Ford that, no more Ford four-door sedans. They're just going to have the Mustang, and then it's a truck company. Basically, it's a light truck and a heavy truck company. I thought maybe it was because ICE engines are allowed for trucks. Maybe the view is ICE is okay for trucks, internal combustion engines.
I sent a nasty email around 2 days ago, and I don't think a lot of people caught it. Well, maybe they caught it, maybe they didn't catch it. I didn't really care. But one of the things that interests me, it deeply interests me, because it's kept me poor. It kept me really poor most of my adult professional life, and on a relative basis. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about how did that happen? Or how is it the case that I missed all these important platform transitions? And so now I'm watching all of the people that I talk to, various people that I talk to, who I asked them if, you really, like a couple of my buddies says, you really don't think that it will be illegal for Ford and Chevrolet to sell a car with a gas tank or Harley Davidson after 2034. I mean, you really don't believe that. And they all, to a man, say, well, I don't know, I'm not sure. And so that begs the question, how does that happen? How does somebody become so embedded with an idea that's incorrect, demonstrably incorrect, okay? Yet people get attached to that idea and they just I don't believe it. And so then you think, well, why might someone not believe that? Generally, in my conclusion, it's because they're rich. I mean, if you're a rich guy, you don't even care. It's a car, it's 70 grand. What are you talking about? Leave me alone. How's my stock doing? Okay. So they just don't even care. And so the ability to connect the dots between those demonstrable facts and the ability to create an enormous amount of wealth are connected. I mean, they are related intimately. And so to not care and or not know that what Pat saith is true will cost someone who can't be bothered an enormous amount of personal wealth. And all they have to do is ask one simple question. Is what Pat saith true or not true? I mean, it's not like it's hard, okay? So Pat, you realize that Musk is the richest guy in the world, and this observation really means probably he's going to miss a lot of the other platform changes, and he probably will end up misguiding these companies that, of course, he's no longer the real CEO in. Maybe that's the answer. He's not the real CEO in them, but he's not really going to cause any of the new platform changes because he's too wealthy to pay attention to any of it, right? Or is he the exception? No. He is the igniter of the. Look, I got lucky with. I got really lucky with Amazon in 2014 and 15, when suddenly I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and we were talking about underwear. True story. He was in the back seat. Patricia's sitting next to me.
Overnight delivery of underwear. That's it.
He said he had his phone. He says, I have an underwear subscription. Wait a minute. What are you talking about? I got an underwear subscription, and he said, and from the back seat of the car, he says, "I'll sign you up." Okay. And he signed me up. And so a month later, I get this little package of fancy schmancy men's underwear. in the mail, and I thought, so let me get this straight. Somebody out there believes that it's a viable business model to send Pat Duke a pair of underwear. And so that's when I started doing all the work on Amazon, got really lucky, got attached to Amazon. And then I sort of drilled down and did the math. And then the megajoule ratio, a gallon of gas, not a gallon, a liter, a milliliter, I guess what it is, one unit of gasoline has roughly 43 megajoules of energy. That's the number, okay? Right. The equivalent unit of an LFP battery has 0.25 megajoules of equivalent energy. So if I get that equivalent energy of gasoline, I'm going to go almost 13 times farther than I am with that megajoule of LFP battery. I mean, it was an extraordinary number. And the more I fiddled with the number, then I realized, oh, okay, so why you do that is this idea of infinite use versus finite use. The gasoline only gets used once. Right. That unit of LFP battery gets used into infinity. And so that's when I began to understand how Musk can ultimately be worth $60 trillion in 2035. Because what we're asking is, where does that money come from? If I'm going to say to you, he was worth $1 billion in 2012, and he's worth $400 billion today, and that's a 66% compound annual growth rate, and I take that CAGR and I extend it to 2035, I get to $60 trillion. Well, where does that money come from? Well, it's this concept of finite versus infinite use. So if there were $3 trillion worth of petroleum sold in 2024, and that's roughly a good number, okay? Mm-hmm. Right. Of that because it's 92 million barrels a day is what we use and have used for the last 10 years. It's been relatively flat. So if you take average price per barrel for 2024 times 92 million, you get $3 trillion. And you say, okay, right. So $3 trillion in 2024, it's been roughly flat for the last 10 years. Normalize oil and gasoline prices at the pump, okay, at retail or whatever. Normalize that. Over 10 years, that's $30 trillion, okay? Right. Well, all of that $30 trillion never gets used again. It's gone forever, as opposed to LFP batteries, all of these batteries. And so suddenly you start to see, because we live in a world of, the first law of thermodynamics, you can neither increase nor decrease the amount of energy, of information. Can't happen. So where does Musk's, if I'm going to say 60 trillion for Musk in 2035, where's it come from? Well, that's where it comes from. Because if you do a Google search for the top 100 E&P companies by market cap, you do the top 100, you can go all the way down to the number 100th company, and you'll still know the name of that 100th company. Shell, BP, Total, Alpha Catane. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And that's how much money that was transferred from planet Earth to these trillionaires. Right. And then suddenly you think, oh my, this is so much bigger than I ever imagined what's happening. Because stop and think about this. Then you do a Google search for the top 100 private oil and gas companies, and you get the Clint Murchisons, the Hunt family out of Dallas, who I used to work for. You get all of these private massive oil and gas companies, and then you realize, wait a second, it takes 10 EV battery companies to make up 93% of the total production of all EV battery companies on planet Earth, and they're all broadly in China. CATL is 35%, BYD is 15%. So you've got this massive concentration in these battery companies that are 100% displacing every oil and gas company that has ever existed. And you just, who are you going to tell that to? Well, the only person that can reasonably have that conversation with is someone who's really drunk at an RV park that I happen to be sitting next to, and I take him hostage.
Here's the other observation from that. Musk figured out exactly what you said early on, and then applied it to SpaceX to say we got to be able to reuse the rockets. We got to be able to reuse the rockets.
Exactly. That's all that's happened.
He's like, we can't just blow these rockets up. We can't do it the way NASA's done it for the last 70 years. Right. That's crazy.
Right.
And you think that NASA would have figured this out itself at some point.
No. Stop. You know better than that. You know better. The shame on you. You know better than that. So let's see. Morton Thiokol, we're going to build these rockets, or Lockheed, we're going to build these rockets, and we're going to make a 20% net margin on these rockets. If we throw them in the ocean, we get to do it again.
Right.
You have to be you literally have to be out of your mind to build and design a rocket that comes back and gets reused.
Right.
It's like the worst business model ever.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
Okay.
So the one thing I want to focus on before we end this is you observed, which I thought was very prescient, that while Musk is building this or is buying, I guess, these machines that basically print cars. I mean, that's exactly. That's a loose way of saying they're basically
No. You hit the nail on the head.
Right.
They have transitioned making cars to Hershey's Kisses.
Right.
It's a
and there's another
bar.
company that's doing it in China using Chinese equipment, and Musk is using Chinese equipment as well, right?
Well,
which I assume is tariffed now, right? Isn't all that equipment?
No. Look, the gigapresses are just another platform technology. They are completely uninteresting. They are of no consequence. They got their first one. Idra is an Italian. Idra is headquartered in Italy, but they were purchased in 2008. They were founded in 2002, but they were purchased in 2008 by a Chinese company. And so,
wow, the Italians shouldn't have given that company up. The Italians shouldn't have given that company up, right?
No, anybody can make it. It's a platform technology. It's like the wheel. You're not going to protect it. Okay, so you have to wait for the demand to arrive.
Okay,
well, the demand wasn't there until 2020 for the EVs, because you have to remember, it was not that long ago. 1.8 million EVs were sold in the US in 2024. So you have to get to some level of scale before it makes sense for that gigapress industry to take off. And so as of right now, Xiaomi is using a company called Haitian. Okay, so Tesla's using Idra. The other companies are LK Group, Bueller, Izumi, UBE, a company called Ital Pas Gas, Guangdong Honggu. I mean, it's just a shitty business.
So you're saying it's available, but it's mostly Chinese, right? Mostly Chinese companies making this press, right?
Well, exactly. There's mostly Chinese companies making the press. Well, hang on, I've got the.
But is Tesla making the press as well?
No, Tesla, they don't manufacture the gigapress. No, they buy them from Idra.
Why not? Why aren't they making them?
Why would you even want to be in the battery business?
No.
Look, here's the battery business. CATL 36. This says a 2024. CATL 36.7%. BYD 15.8%. Panasonic 6.8%. Others 6.8%. SK 5.1%, Samsung 4.8%, LG Chem. There's another little company I can't read. I can get my glasses up, but anyway, they're all Chinese. It's a shitty business.
Yeah.
Why would you want to be in the battery business?
No, I'm talking about Gigapress.
Nobody wants to be in the Gigapress business either, because after 2030, after 2038, there are 1.4 billion cars in the global fleet right now. So when you get on the highway in your RV, there's 1.4 billion cars you're passing. Okay.
Right.
So if you buy a car today, that car is still going to be on the road in 2038.
Right.
Your car's going to last 13 years. Somebody's going to be driving it. So you've got a massive fleet that broadly ICE fleet that broadly is going to extend into 2038 or 2040.
Right.
And then after that, you just have a replacement cycle.
Right.
It's like the iPhone business. It's a replacement business. It took 9 years for the iPhone. But by 2016, smartphone, including Android. By 2016, everybody that wanted a smartphone had a smartphone.
Right.
And so then it became a replacement cycle. But the main money from Apple is all the cash that the services throw off.
Right.
That's the main thing, and that's what matters. So,
and by the way, a judge last week found that was a monopoly, and Apple's control of the App Store and the 30% charge. He ruled that the failure to comply with her order was a civil contempt, and she referred the case to the Department of Justice for criminal contempt proceedings. I wonder if Tim Cook is losing any sleep over this, because he might get balled in.
He doesn't care.
He'll probably quit. Matter. He'll probably retire early before that case.
It's never going to happen. Nothing's ever going to happen. Listen, I ask people all the time, how many companies have ever been broken up in America? And they all say Standard Oil. Yeah. And then they say, well, what about AT&T? They were never broken up. They changed names.
Right. That's right.
They were never broken up. I mean, John D. Rockefeller danced a jig on the golf course when he heard about it, because all of a sudden he had 5 and 6 different companies that were trading at their own multiple.
Right. That's going to happen to Google. That's going to happen to Google as well.
Exactly. It is the most absurd idea that somehow this is going to be bad for these companies. Can Apple might they be forced to spin off the services business? Of course, but it'll only happen because Apple's lobbyists lobbied to make it happen. Right. Right. So what are we talking about with the differentiator? Because I was asked this question today. If Tesla makes shitty EVs, and BYD makes shitty EVs, and Xiaomi makes shitty EVs, and all these companies make shitty EVs, and it's not possible to differentiate them, because you can't, just like you can't differentiate a flashlight. Right. And it's a flashlight, and you put a battery in it, that's it, end of story. Okay. Right. And if they all have equidistant product relative to full self-driving, it's not possible for Tesla to have a better full self-driving offering than BYD or Xiaomi. Right. Why should I own Tesla instead of all the other ones? Because why shouldn't I own Xiaomi? Because Xiaomi and BYD are going to be bigger EV companies by factors. Right. By factor of at least 4, but probably more like 10. Easily, especially BYD, because they're 15%. They control 15% of the EV battery market. Right. So what's the differentiator? Right. Okay, so when I say Musk doesn't give a shit about Tesla, I mean, I'm not joking about that. Right. Okay, he cares about the connectivity, because all of his cars and all of the EVs are going to be connected to the Tesla satellite network. Right. Okay, so I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't have any idea what that's going to look like, but I do have a strong bet that that's the end market, because don't forget, in 2011, you probably had an idea that I don't know, that something like TikTok would come around one of these days, or X would come around, or Twitter would come around, but I didn't. I don't have that ability to sort of imagine these new product sets that are going to arrive.
Right.
It never occurred to me that I'd have a ring on my finger that tracks my sleep patterns.
Yeah, that's the Oura ring. You have the same Oura ring that I have, but you have
right. I mean, could you imagine that in 2010? No. So we don't have any ability to. I don't have any ability to discern what kind of products are going to come out of these things. But I will tell you one thing. I will say this, hand on heart. I have $1,000 to $1,500 price target for Tesla from my account this year, and I do it because of robotaxi.
This year, 9 months. 9 months left.
That's nothing.
Less than 9 months, 7 months.
The stock was at an all-time high in February. So take 488 times 2, I'm there. Right. Okay, I mean, 2.5, I'm there. It's not a big move, is my point. But I think this robotaxi phenomenon, of which Tesla is going to be an irrelevant participant, is going to be by far the most important new platform in the history of modern transportation. It'll be unlike anything we have ever seen or imagined. Because don't forget, 500,000 units will be coming off of that factory floor in Austin, Texas in 8 months. 500,000 cars that don't have a steering wheel, don't have a brake pedal, don't have a gas pedal. And so how is it possible that all of these people can count themselves investors and not think that that's kind of different?
It's easy.
That's different.
I see your point. We'll continue this conversation because I'm convinced there's a fund in the future, but I know you don't believe me. I think there's a fund.
No, I do believe you. Of course I believe you. You manage the fund. It's a pair trade. You long the EV stocks, short the gasoline stocks.
Right. That's it, right? That's it.
That's all you do.
And you have a podcast about it. You have a weekly podcast about it that talks about how it's playing out. That's it.
Exactly.
That's the business.
You set it up. You set it up, and we'll get it going. All right.
All right. Good. I got you committed. I appreciate that. I got you committed. I owe you dinner in my EV in Philadelphia. When I pull up some night, you've got to come out with Patricia, and we'll have dinner in the EV.
I want a fried bologna sandwich on white bread.
We'll get you that. See you later.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.